Continuing a series of definitions of terminology, we're going to turn to sex, gender, gender identity, and sexuality. Part of the social construction of sex and gender is the belief that many separate traits are inevitably related. In women's studies, we try and break those down. Sex and gender are typically used interchangeably, but in women's studies, we understand these to be distinct ideas. Sex is the physical, biological aspects of a person, their genitals, chromosomes, hormones, body shape, secondary sexual characteristics such as breasts or facial hair. Sex is constructed as binary, meaning there are believed to be only two options, what we call male or female. These two sexes are sometimes referred to as opposite, although it's important to remember that this too is a social construction. Gender is the cultural aspects of a person, the clothes they wear, the way they act, the job they have, the things they enjoy, the way they style their hair. Gender is also constructed as binary, what we call masculine or feminine. The assumption is that people's sex and gender will match, that male people will be masculine and female people will be feminine. This division between sex and gender can be useful, but it's also been questioned by modern scholars in women's studies. Our bodies are not physically immutable, but can be altered by the choices we make. If a person gets breast implants, for example, that is a physical change culturally chosen. There is nothing inherent, we argue, about the associations between biological traits and the sex we associate with them. In other words, the idea that a penis is male is socially constructed. For these reasons, you will often hear me refer to sex-gender. When a baby is born, they are typically assigned a sex. The medical professional says, "It's a boy," or "It's a girl." This, typically, is based entirely on the appearance of the baby's genitals. Our socially constructed assumption is that a person's genitals will predict all other aspects of their sex, that a person with a penis will have XY chromosomes, testosterone as their dominant hormone, will develop a male-appearing body, grow facial hair, and so forth. This assumption is incorrect. Many people have a mixture of traits. Sometimes the genitalia of a baby is considered ambiguous. The doctor cannot tell if the baby is male or female by looking at their genitals. These people are called intersex. People may also find out they are intersex later in life, after a chromosome test, for example. Intersex manifests in a wide variety of ways, but what all intersex people have in common is that their bodies do not conform to the social constructed sex binary. People also have a gender identity, which, just to be confusing, is the sex they believe themselves to be. A person who says, "I am male," has a male gender identity. For some people, their gender identity is the same as the sex they were assigned at birth. These people are called cis, spelled C-I-S. A cis woman is a person who identifies as a woman and was assigned female at birth. A person whose gender identity is not the same as their sex assigned at birth is trans. We refer to trans people by their gender identity, not by their sex assigned at birth. So a trans woman is a person who identifies as a woman and was assigned male at birth. We use she to refer to her. Trans people may or may not undergo a variety of gender-confirming actions, including using a name and pronouns appropriate to their gender identity, wearing clothes commonly associated with their identity, or taking the hormones associated with their gender identity, and potentially having medical procedures to allow their body to conform with the expectations of the body of someone with their gender identity. Someone is trans based on their identity, regardless of which of these actions they choose to take. Some people have a strongly held binary gender identity. They're either male or female. Some people do not. Such people might identify as genderqueer, non-binary, or agender. Sexuality is the term we use to describe the interaction between our sex gender and the sex gender of the people to whom we are attracted. Heterosexual or straight people are binary sex gender people attracted to people of the opposite, in quotes, sex. Homosexual or gay people are binary sex gender people attracted to people of the same sex. Bisexual people are attracted to both sexes, although today many bisexual people are also attracted to non-binary people. Pansexual people are attracted to binary and non-binary people. Asexual people do not experience sexual attraction. Some homosexual, bisexual, pan, and asexual people may identify as queer. This is a term that has been reclaimed by people within the community, but may be offensive when used by people outside of the community. Note that any of these sexuality terms are applicable for people of all genders and gender identities, so a trans person can be homosexual, heterosexual, or pansexual. Sexuality is not as simple as attracted to implied by the previous definitions. People may have different sexual, romantic, friendship, or companionship attractions. People's sexual practices are also not necessarily the same as their sexual identity. For example, some men may have sex with men and identify as heterosexual.
As Unitarian Universalists, we can be proud of our denomination's long history of embracing sexuality in all its forms. But despite our denomination's sex-positive posture, many of us, myself included, struggle with the paradox of sex and spirituality. We ask ourselves questions like, when is sex holy? Or, is it wrong to have this urge I'm having? Or, how will I find my heart's true desire? I think at heart, these are theological questions. This past January, I was taking classes at Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago, where I'm a second-year student. I invited some Unitarian Universalist seminarians to talk to me about their theology of sexuality. 4 brave souls stepped forward, and here's some of what they had to say.
So I grew up in the UU Church, and I feel so lucky to have done so because I grew up with an idea that my body, that sexuality, that physical interaction with others was not only an accepted but a celebrated and integrated part of who I was as a spiritual person.
Interesting topic. I don't think of myself as having a theology of sexuality. I do feel that I have an implicit set of assumptions that could be formed into a theology if someone wanted to help me do that.
In the bigger picture, my most deeply held Unitarian Universalist value is that first principle of the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And that really, for me, just feeds into, in terms of sexuality, the idea that I can ask for what I need, I can say no to what's not right for me. Those things can change, and I own that.
Well, right off the bat, I think about the binaries that we get caught up in, like male and female, and gay and straight, and top and bottom. And I think about how I just don't believe that God deals in binaries. I don't think God makes binaries.
It wasn't just about sex. It was about covenant and how we build relationships with the people who matter to us.
So, being a Unitarian, I feel like part of the responsibility of being Unitarian is because that there's a responsibility to not only fight the homophobia that I might have grown up with, but also to determine for myself what is my gender preference in sexuality and the like.
But it also translates into how I view other people, and whether it's gender roles or sexuality. I have a real passion for transgender rights, and I play in a band with someone on the transgender spectrum, and we sing and rock out about those issues. And so it's a lively, spiritual, musical experience for me that I tie back to my Unitarian Universalist beliefs and values.
I think God makes spectrums, but they're not even really spectrums. It's really a circle. God makes a cycle or an entire palette, but we people decide that certain things are opposites, and then that pass that down to us.
And affirmed who we are as people with the right to choose who we love, how we love them, how we physically interact with each other. Everything from handshakes to hugs to kissing.
I will say that I feel that sexuality and sex is it's part of the joy of life.
I mean, I think about, in terms of sexuality and religion, what I hope for my children. I have a son who's 3 and a daughter who's 5, and I hope that both of them sense a spirituality to their being, to their body, and that they don't separate the body from the spirit. That's something that is really important to me, and something that I express through dance and music and worship.
And I used to believe in that until one day I heard somebody. I had always believed that the opposite of love was hate, but one day somebody said to me, "No, the opposite of love is indifference, because in both hate and love you have an investment, but in indifference you have no." And then I realized, so these opposites are actually arbitrary.
So when we build our interactions together, when we build covenant together, it's not just about our thoughts or our words, it's about every piece of who we are, and that includes our physical selves. For me, sexuality and teaching about sexuality is an integral part of how we form a church community that is truly a beloved community.
Just making sure if you have kids, that they understand, they learn well and safely and without shame. I have 2 daughters. The idea that either of them would experience shame for either orientation or for responsible pleasure is really abhorrent. So
You get into this good and bad arbitrary thinking, and then you start to believe that there's a list of right and wrong things that is hard and fast from the beginning of time, and that gets you into the kind of thinking where you think there's things you're not supposed to do. But I know in my heart that God does not have a list of acceptable sex practices.
I love how the ideas you just heard show some of the great diversity of thought with our denomination, but also have a common thread, this underlying value of compassion for each other and for ourselves. I pray that you can find a theology of sexuality that allows you to bring your whole self to your relationship, and better yet, brings you some good loving. Amen, and blessed be.